Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here for another in our APPI Focus on ARV Learn by Doing series. And the topic which we'll be discussing is ego, consciousness, and spirit. And I have to tell you that this ego portion, which I'll be telling you a lot about, and managing it may be something which has been missing for many of us in terms of our ARV hit rate, in terms of improving it. But I'll get into that shortly. So here's the outline for today. From 12 to 12:30, we'll do the tutorial, which will include, hints for newbies and oldies. And then from 12:30 to 1:30, we'll take an hour or so and talk about this ego, consciousness, and spirit. And then we'll do feedback for half an hour or so for the month earlier prediction that we did. And in particular, I'm going to go into this HAG, which stands for Harsh Analysis with Gestalts, and we'll go into that in some detail to try to make that plain, because the next hour we will actually be doing a prediction for next month, and it'll include you doing a RV session and then a HAG analysis of your transcript. So that's the plan. ARV, Associative Remote Viewing, and let's first discuss it in linear time. But the whole point of ARV is to apply precognition. But the way we do that is during what is really a standard remote viewing session, with the tasking being describe and sketch your feedback target. And we use a 6-digit coordinate, numerical coordinate. And that's very much like in remote viewing, describe and sketch your target. In this case, just to be absolutely clear, you will be describing the target and the one and only target that you will see and experience during your feedback session. That is your task, your charter, your cue. And then later in time, we have the feedback session. And during the feedback session, we also will really get into the target. Different now because you'll be able to look at it and you'll have your transcript with you, and we will be doing a feedback from the last month's work that we did. But notice here, later in time, is the connection. And this connection is the whole objective for you as a remote viewer. However, in associative remote viewing, we usually have an application in mind, and that involves analysis of the RV transcript, which you generated in your first session. Now, here and in the work that we're mostly doing, and we do some other things as well, but our primary focus is on investments in financial markets or betting in sports markets. In both cases, these are binary ARV predictions. For the financial markets, this means you're going to be predicting up or down or sometimes pass. Now, we use stops and limits. So it's not just up for the day or down for the day. So the meaning of up or down depends on the specific tasking. Um, but it's always binary, and this is the way that now works. Because we have two possibilities, up or down, it makes sense that there would be two possible targets. Notice here, you're going for the one target at feedback. So what do we mean about these two possible targets? Well, one of the possible targets is associated with up. The other possible target is associated with down. Always, without exception, the actual target shown during the feedback session will be associated with what actually happens, either up or down. So when you do your remote viewing session here, and you happen to get a really good match with the down target, let's say, then remember, there are two possible ones here, and the analyst will get to see both of them. So if there's a good match with the down target, it makes sense that the prediction and the investment will be for that particular day to go down. If the match were really good with the up target, then the prediction would be up and there would be an opportunity to invest in the up direction. So it really is quite logical once you accept what many may think is being illogical, but if you're here, you know it's logical and the way the universe works. Once you accept that precognition is real, then you can see that your description will be of the feedback target, which is what actually happens. And so right after doing the analysis with whichever one is the very good match, you can make an investment. The investment could be up, down, as I say, sometimes we pass. And in between, again, we remember in linear time, you make your investment, the financial market does its thing in here, and you have an outcome. And the actual outcome of up or down will determine the feedback target that you see. Believe it or not, I'm going to give you other perspective on this, but that's what ARV is all about. And since precognition is real, ARV works. It doesn't work 100% of the time. Precognition is not yet 100% reliable for any of us, but it certainly gives us an edge over chance. Now, here's another perspective, starting with the feedback session, because I am a big proponent of the fact that precognition begins with the feedback target, the actual target. That's when you know the truth point. How often do you know for sure the truth? Well, you know that at feedback time. You know what the actual target is. And we're involved in purposeful and successful precognition, and that begins here in this bigger picture of perhaps being outside of space and time. There are many perspectives which you can have for precognition. All the information is out there already. For example, the eternal now, where the information is indeed out there, so you have access to it. And having access to the feedback target is what the remote viewer is doing with their tasking, which you've seen. Now let's talk a little bit about the target as we use it in app and APPI. We like to think of the target as a photo site as opposed to a photo, but they're obviously related. The photo site refers to the specific photographed site at the specific time the photo was taken. Okay, so you have a photo, it was taken at a specific time, and it is showing information. Now, consciousness is expected to gather information from the photo, colors, shapes, etc. But more than that, and that's what makes it a photo site. If you were to be at that target, you also would be able to pick up sounds, smells, tactile sensations, emotions. Perhaps there'd be ideas being displayed there. Anything which your normal senses could pick up. And so that, in fact, is your task. When we say describe and sketch a feedback target, your task is to describe and or sketch what can be obviously verified from the photo. I'm not interested in what's 100 feet away from what's shown in the photo, because that won't do the analyst any good. So the remote viewer is specifically instructed, tasked to describe and sketch what can be obviously verified from the photo. So that includes these first impression gestalts. When you first look at the photo, you get kind of the big picture idea of several aspects of it. Is it inside, outside, lots of water, things like that. But you also can get more details too. And all of your senses are active here. Visuals, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations. If there's emotional stuff going on at the site, you can certainly report that. Ideas, etc. Anything that you would get if indeed you're at the site. Now, here's an example. Now, you can look at this picture, right? It's two-dimensional, but it's pretty obvious that there are sounds. That'd be a good thing to get, in addition to the shapes that you see here and the ball and everything. There's motion. Obviously it's a still photograph, but it's obvious that there's motion involved. You get all the colors, etc., if that was your target. But we are now using this HAG, the harsh analysis and gestalts. And even though you could infer that there are people there, that is not in the photo site. And so we would not include people. Your description should just stay with what is right here shown in the photo site. So that would make it, clear as a judge using this. Perhaps the people, in fact, other than the photographer, which is always ignored, are really not there. Who knows? Anyway, that is what we mean by harsh analysis. People would not now be included in this possible target, and if you were describing this photo site. Okay. This advice has been given in so many contexts. Virtually all the trainers at one point or time will say this, and I will repeat it because it is really true. Practice, practice, practice. This is like a doctor who keeps learning, or a shaman. They don't stop. This is not something which you finally learn like arithmetic or algebra. Uh, you really can learn everything there is to know about arithmetic, about your alphabet. We are not in that regime because you're really learning about yourself and how to communicate with yourself. So I believe, and I hope you believe, that the ideas associated with ARV, the describe and sketch your feedback target, and that precognition is really easy, and how we apply it with the analysis is actually rather straightforward. But you need to build it into you, and there's so many subtleties in the communication that it really is practice, 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 like a doctor or a shaman. Joe McMoneagle, who most of you probably certainly know of, one of the best, I'd say, public remote viewers out there. He's done more public remote viewings, I think, than anybody else. Always used to do 6 per week, at least 1 a day. And it was for this reason. Okay, now I want to go and just get you to feel comfortable with how we do this, because everything is done online. And it begins with the tasking email. And here's an example of one. This is one which we did, I guess, a few months ago. And we have lots of groups. We have 10 financial groups, 2 sports groups. And so the name of the group is here. If you're not in a group, just email and we'll get you in one besides this one that you're using now. And we always have a due date, and then the event is listed. Now, some people actually even want the event to be blind, and they'll sometimes say that. And the event certainly can be blind. All you really want to do is describe and sketch a feedback photo. However, we all do give information at prediction time, which I showed you earlier, after the analysis, and the event will be announced there so that you can act on it if you want to. And all you do to activate this is you click here. We have these simple links. So after a while, you just simply click on this link to get your coordinate. And what this link will then do is it'll ask for your email address. Here's a list of all the groups we have. But you would put your email address here because the targets generally are unique to each email address, unique to you. So you can't peek at anybody else. You're going to have your own email target. You need to go to your own feedback. And then once you put in your email address, you will get your coordinate. A screen like this will come up, and at the top of it will be the cue or the tasking that we've been talking about. Describe and sketch your feedback target. And your job right now, once you have a coordinate, like in all remote viewing, you go ahead and do your remote viewing session. You know, many of you come from different styles of doing remote viewing, and you use whatever style you've come up with, you know, CRV, ERV, whatever it is that you want to do. There are others out there. I don't even know what all their names are, but there are a fair number of people teaching remote viewing nowadays. So you would now do that. Now, after you do your remote viewing session with your coordinate, which is all you need, the next step would be step 2, which is the analysis session. And the way you do that is you put your transcript, and it's called upload. Most of you in this day and age, I think, are familiar with doing that. You might use a browser or a smartphone to get it on your computer, and then you would upload it to our server, which is the computer that saves all of this and saves all the information about everybody, plus notes and things that they put in. And then you can begin the analysis. Now, what's so interesting, and I think good for you to know, your target, and even the two possible targets, are not chosen until you upload your transcript. This is truly precognitive. And even then, it's done in a very random fashion. Wait, I'm hearing noise here. Let me take this out. This is done in a very random fashion in terms of we have 800 pre-paired target pairs. This is an example of two possible targets. And we have 800 pairs like this. And we try to make them different, but there are usually some similarities. Some of these lines you may say, oh, look at that. But it's your job to describe this well enough so that we can distinguish. And certainly the colors are very different. The sound of the splashing would be very different. Dry, wet. Both of these happen to be outdoors, but a lot of our pairs have one indoors and one outdoors. When you do 800 of these, if you ever try to do that yourself, you'll find there's some challenges involved. But we've done the best, and we upgrade these from time to time when we find pairs which we think are better than some that are in there already. So here is an example for a specific coordinate. Now, the way this actually comes up, because we actually recommend, and what actually comes up will be photo site 8 all by itself, and so that you can analyze it versus your transcript. And then you scroll down a little more, and then there's photo site B, and you can analyze it, and we're going to talk about how to do that in more detail. And then you get something here which you put in terms of this Stanford Research Institute, TARG, Russell Targ's confidence ranking, which is a scale between 0 and 7, with 3.5 being wagerable. I'll have more to say about that, but now we're talking about sort of the overall approach. And it's here where you do your analysis, and you simply put in, there's a drop-down menu here, which will give you the selections between 0 and 7, and the same thing for photo site B. Put in your comments. Those are saved and are available to you for later analysis. That's the purpose of this, is so that you can continue to get better and better. And so these comments are for you. And then step 3 is the feedback step. And again, it will come with an email, and you simply would click here. These numbers are simply what make this all unique. And it will tell you what the winning side is there. In this case, the answer was no. And then you click, and it'll ask you again for your email address. And here is what a typical feedback target screen will look like. And so here is where you have the information, the gestalts of water, people, action. Those are the big gestalts. And then you get lower, and you might pick up brown, blue, even necklace, the shape of it, whatever you do, it's coming from here. That's the whole idea of ARV. Questions, comments that I hope for your newbies really clarifies what ARV is all about and how we do it on the internet. But if there are any questions, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. Okay, let's move on. Ego, consciousness, and spirit. I want to tell you that I was actually motivated to get into this ego thing by two people, Joe McMonagle and Tom McNear. I had a call to Joe and I was asking him, I must admit, out of frustration, why our best viewers, we've got this program called Precog Pro, where we'll pay viewers based on how well they do. And we're sort of stuck. The best viewer is at 68%. Now, that's not bad. These are 50-50 propositions. That's pretty good. But why can't we go any higher? And he basically said it's ego. And I started not only thinking about that, looking at it, looking what a lot of people say, and this was the motivation for what you're seeing here. All of this is intended to make your ARVing, RVing, and frankly, I think many aspects of your life better. So here's one definition of ego. A person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. We've all heard the expression, oh, that was a boost to my ego, or felt that. But, here's sort of a sketch at this level of ego. I'm going to get into a deeper level shortly, but there's a lot to this. How do you feel about yourself? You think you're terrific. This cat thinks it's a lion, but sometimes it goes the other way. But this one, are you in charge of everything associated with you? Is the ego at the top of the self? Do you think that's the way it is? Is the ego a friend or an enemy? Those would be the kind of questions that we're going to get into. And frankly, it can be both. You certainly need your ego for your day-to-day stuff. Here's a deeper, and the definition which we're really going to be working with, and it comes from Carl Jung. The ego represents the conscious mind. Okay, now, he's talking in a very general sense, and that's fine, but I want us to realize that by conscious mind, he means the stuff which is in the now, the conscious mind, what you're conscious of now, and then you're conscious of something else now. It comprises all of those thoughts, memories. When you have a memory from the past, you are experiencing that in your now conscious mind. Okay? So the ego represents the now conscious mind through time, because we're in the physical world now, as it comprises thoughts, memories, and emotions that a person is aware of, that's come up through maybe a subconscious, for example, into his conscious mind. The ego is largely responsible for feelings of identity and continuity. Now, we couldn't survive without egos. Egos are what get us through our day-to-day lives. That's what we learn from little children. How do we survive? How do we pick up things? How do we stay away from hot things? We learn to walk. We learn all kinds of things that are vital to our day-to-day functioning in the physical world. So the ego is certainly a good thing and a necessary thing, and period. So we all have them, we all use them. The issue in the context of ARV and remote viewing, but I'll just say ARV, is who is in charge of the bigger full self. And I use this symbol for something, even the definition of self gets to be very difficult, and it's fuzzy. Those of you who have seen some of my earlier stuff, I call this a fuzzy boundary. But this is the symbol for the bigger you, the you that has all of the psi capabilities, which can be activated, including ARV, and of course there are plenty others. Now, is the ego in charge of that? Well, I don't think so. And in fact, here's a definition of self, and this is Jungian in nature. The archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the psyche, which is all of this is a transpersonal power that transcends the ego. So the self indeed is bigger and bigger than the ego. And I think you all know that, but putting this in the right context. What's the psyche? One definition, the definition here is the totality of all psychological processes, both conscious and unconscious. So here, the psyche would be almost your total non-physical self. So your I psi is like your psyche. This happens to be a representation of Psyche, who happens to be a Greek goddess. And notice there are buried negatives in there, okay, which the ego worries about more than anything else. Now, ARV is and has been made analogous to a martial art by many people. I'll say the analogy with archery, and he also talks about swordsmanship here. And this one, this came out in the 50s, this came out later, can't remember exactly when, maybe the 70s. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And then there were a whole series of the inner games. The inner game of tennis was the first one. And all of these are talking about mastering what do you want to call it in general? Mastering a skill, whether it's archery, swordsmanship, maintaining your motorcycle, or playing tennis. And as I'm about to show you, they all have different angles on this idea of ego and consciousness and even spirit. So let me give you some quotes. Here's from Zen in the Art of Archery. And this is the master talking to Eugene Herrigel, who is the author. Don't think of what you have to do. Don't consider how to carry it out, he exclaimed. He was actually angry at him. The shot will only go smoothly when it takes the archer himself by surprise. the archer himself by surprise. Very interesting. And I know Russell Targ has often said the best stuff in remote viewing is when something comes up like out of nowhere. It just surprises you. It's not the ego doing it, asking, well, let me give you, all of these will give you different angles on this so that you can get this deeply, so you can grok this, so you can really get it deep inside you. All I can do is intellectually share this, but the goal is to have each of you get this deep so you can apply it. What stands in your way, so he was a student, he first sort of learned the techniques of it, but he wasn't able to hit the target. What stands in your way is that you have much too willful will. Does that sound like the ego? You think that what you do not do yourself does not happen. And the you he's referring to here is the ego. It's like your ego, what you consider yourself to be most of the time, has to be in charge. And you think what you do not do yourself does not happen. The right art, cried the master, is purposeless, aimless. You just have to sort of get the idea here. It's like I can't explain it. Purposeless. You're doing it in a way where the ego gives up having any purpose. It's deeper. The more obstinately you try to learn how to shoot the arrow for the sake of hitting the goal, the less you will succeed in the one, and the further the other will recede. The further you'll get from hitting your goal, the more you try to learn how to shoot the arrow for the sake of hitting the goal. Right? Sounds contradictory, but only to the ego, only to, I want to call it the lesser part. In this context, I think that's accurate. But again, you got to have your own ego. But in terms of ARV, you got to set it aside. You have to make it purposeless to the ego. The shot will only go smoothly when it takes the archer himself by surprise. It's like the ego part of the archer. What happened? How did that happen? The shot will only go smoothly when it takes the archer himself by surprise. Now, this is the ultimate. He's really trying to teach him Zen now. You must learn. Somebody has a mic on. You must learn to wait properly by letting go of yourself, leaving yourself and everything yours behind you so decisively that nothing more is left of you but, again, this idea of purposeless tension. Purposeless tension. Being able to wait without purpose in the state of highest tension, without continually asking yourself, shall I be able to manage it? Okay, that's the ego worrying. Wait patiently and I think see what comes and how it comes. This then is what counts. A lightning reaction which has no further need of conscious observation. In this respect, at least the pupil makes himself independent of all conscious purpose. Now here's the summary. It happens to be at the end of the swordsmanship section, which is second, but here it is. The more he tries to make he being the pupil, the student, the more he tries to make the brilliance of his swordplay dependent on his own reflection, his own ego, on the conscious utilization of his skill, on his fighting experience and tactics, the more he inhibits the free working of the heart, brings the heart in, um, uh, which is beautiful, I think, in addition to the subconscious, which he brings in. And also, what is to be done? How does the skill become spiritual? Right? Always with Zen, the idea is to become like a spiritual being. How does the skill now become spiritual? And how does sovereign, what, please stay muted unless you want to ask a question. What is to be done? How does the skill become spiritual? And how does sovereign control of technique turn into master swordplay? How does the skill become spiritual? And how does sovereign, which is an interesting word here, but maybe the whole control of technique, certainly not the ego, turn into master swordplay? Only so we are informed by the pupil becoming purposeless and egoless. He must be taught to be detached not only from his opponent, but from himself. He must pass through the stage he is still at and leave it behind him for good. He must pass through the stage he is still at and leave it behind him for good, even at the risk of irretrievable failure. He must be taught to be detached, not only from his opponent, in this case, I guess, swordplay, but we would see that maybe as the target, to be really detached from the target. Does this sound as nonsensical as a demand that the archer shall hit without aim, that he should completely lose sight of the goal and his intention to hit it? Yeah, I mean, to the logical mind, this is not making any sense. But remember, this master was vindicated in 1,000 contests. I mean, these guys and this master and others have put it together in this strange way. Okay, now let me see if I can connect this up with ARV, and during the remote viewing session in particular, reducing noise. So this is a Tom McNear session, which went all the way to building a model. And I think you can see here and these here how good that is. So clearly he's worth listening to. And he points out early parapsychology researchers sought to strengthen the signal. Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann sought to decrease or eliminate the noise. Understanding the sources of ESP degradation is probably the first step to take in any ESP training. That's from Ingo. Eliminate the noise and the signal can come through. That makes sense. Most noise comes from the analytical brain, right? The ego trying to help. I mean, it's trying to help, okay? But it, in fact, is bringing in noise. Recognizing and declaring analytical overlays. So beginning to recognize when it's coming from the analytical ego, intellectual, high-level mind is one of the real benefits of ARV, because getting the feedback and all that allows you to really look at this and begin to get a real feeling for what is coming from the deeper subconscious versus what really came from the analytical. They have very different feelings once you practice, 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 and pay attention and look at it. So, proper session structure. And this is a major theme of Tom and the people who teach CRV and others. Proper session structure reduces noise. The analytical brain tries to help. Okay, that's a good thing. What we're going to want it to do is just pay attention to structure. Don't try to help describe the target, right? That's what they mean back here when they're talking about hit without taking aim. The analytical mind should not be taking aim at the target. Yeah, we know it wants to help. The way it helps is by just paying attention to structure. Structure, content be damned. That's an important bottom line one. You keep the ego involved with that, watching the structure. And I'll be saying that again in a different way. But first, let's see what Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance has to say about this stuff. Is it hard? Not if you have the right attitudes. It's having the right attitudes that's hard. Getting to set aside the ego so that it doesn't get in the way, so it doesn't try to guess, it doesn't try to help, it just kind of listens is the goal here. When analytical thought, the knife is the way Persig put it here, is applied to experience, something is always killed in the process. So you want to keep that analytical thought away. The real cycle you're working on is a cycle called yourself. And that really is the whole purpose of ARV. And it just extends rather naturally to other parts of your life. The Buddha, the Godhead, resides quite as comfortably in the circuits of a digital computer or the gears of a cycle transmission as he does at the top of the mountain or in the petals of a flower. To think otherwise is to demean the Buddha, which is to demean one's self. That's just sort of a general quote I like. Okay, let's go on to the inner game of tennis here. It is difficult to have fun or achieve concentration when your ego is engaged in what it thinks is a life and death struggle. That sort of makes sense, and it obviously may not think of it in those strong terms, but nevertheless, how about if I lose, I'm really going to feel terrible. I'm not going to die, but I certainly don't want to lose, and that's really very important to me. It's all ego stuff. Fear, which is probably the biggest obstacle to any learning process, is a repressive force. It exists in the mind, and almost always it is based on something that might happen in the future rather than what is happening now. Stay in the conscious now, listening to information coming from deeper parts of yourself, your subconscious. Since the mind seems to have a will of its own, how can one learn to keep it in the present? Practice, practice, practice. See the same themes. Again, focus your attention on the can. What they mean here is one of the ways they practice, especially serves, is they'll put a can off in a corner of the serving box, and your job is to hit the can. That's getting very precise in your serve, going at 100 miles an hour. And he says, again, focus your attention on the can. Okay, that's like focusing your attention on the structure, and then let the serve itself. You know, you've already learned the basics, but if you want to hit the can, you just have to let the serve itself. The player of the inner game comes to value the art of relaxed concentration above all other skills. He discovers a true basis for self-confidence, and he learns that the secret of winning any game lies in not trying too hard. I think the key words here are self-confidence, relaxed concentration, and it's only the ego that would try too hard. You just relax knowing it's going to happen. You focus your attention on the can, on the structure, and you let the information serve itself, come up from the subconscious, from a deeper part of yourself. Okay, here's a summary that very specifically brings in the ego. And it has a viewpoint of two selves. You know, we talk a lot in terms of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and that's the viewpoint here. And reality is always more complicated than any model you can put out there, but some models are very useful in getting you better at certain skills. And I think this one and the one we've been talking about are really valuable in that way. Self one is the teller, our ego conscious mind. Okay, so it's wanting to tell what to do, noticing what's going on. It's this upper level ego. Self two is the doer, our egoless, non-conscious mind, subconscious mind. Self one, excuse me, self one does not trust self two. I think one of the things we need to work on is to get over that, but generally, certainly as a student, and until you master the Zen kind of material we were talking about, I think that's true. Self two holds all the potential for learning and peak performance. But self one often stands in the way. That's why we have to come up with techniques to put it aside. Self one judges and instructs. That's certainly true. The ego does that. Self two learns and does effortlessly. When you walk across the street, you know, after your ego has said, you know, hey, I really want to cross the street, all of the stuff that's involved in simply walking across the street happens effortlessly. Do you realize how complicated that is? But as a child, when you learn to work, it certainly seemed complicated, though that intellectual idea never crossed your mind. But all the muscles that work, but your subconscious does that effortlessly. And that's what we want to have happen in ARV. Self one must be quiet for peak performance. Self two does not need orders. By the time you're in the task itself, you've done a lot of preliminary work. You've done your practice, which goes on, right, forever. And so you know all the basics. Your sub knows what to do. Let it do it. I came up with another quote that I believe is worth sharing. And this is from Ram Dass, who is a name from the Flower Children in San Francisco. Um, but he became quite spiritual. So here's a quote from him. We need the matrix of thoughts, feelings, and sensations we call the ego for our physical and psychological survival. So I think that's true. We do need the ego for our survival in the physical world. The ego, and I'd have to say, however, has convinced us that we need it, not only that we need it, but that we are it. I am my body. I am my personality. I am my neurosis. I am angry. I am depressed. I am a good person. I'm sincere. I seek truth. I'm a lazy slob. Definition after definition. Now, a lot of you are going to think that, nah, none of that applies, but it applies in a more subtle fashion. And that's the job, is to notice that and be able to set the more subtle stuff aside. Definition after definition. As long as the ego calls the shot, we can never become other than what it says. It's like a dictator. It offers us paternalistic security at the expense of our freedom. We may ask how we could survive without our ego. Don't worry, it doesn't disappear. It'll be there. We can learn to venture beyond it, though. When you do that, the ego is there as our servant. And I love this. Finding who you truly are beneath the ego. That's the I Psi. I believe ARV can illuminate that for you. I want to say it in a different way, which I believe is more conventional. And this comes from a Scientific American article entitled the main article in it was Our Unconscious Mind. And how does that fit in with this I Psi, Psi you, if you will? Well, first of all, there's nothing as not conscious. So let's just call this the subconscious, and that's clearly what's meant here. So down here, you might not be able to read this, but this says I sub. There is such a thing called the subconscious mind. Up here is the ego, up at the top level. Okay, so there are these two cells. Now they are interacting all the time. Actions, thoughts, and feelings, they're up here, but they come from beliefs, ideas, emotions, stuff which is down here, which has been saved over time. And I maintain not only the past, but there are future things that can interact here, since we know we're timeless entities. We have access to the past, present, and future. So there's access down here, which bubbles up into various now moments. These are here forever. Here is single moments. Now, what about I Psi? Well, I Psi, I believe, is in the deepest parts of our subconscious. We go deep. It's not about, a memory of something that happened in the past. It's about a memory of something that happened in the future. And for most of us, that's not natural, since it's something we now have to learn. And you remember this universe of collective consciousness. We're talking about stuff down there. And at any time in the physical world, okay, because remember, we're doing this in the physical world. We have one foot in the spiritual world, one foot in this physical world. At any time in the physical world, reducing the ego permits spiritual skills to manifest. All the Psi skills will manifest, but you need to get the ego down, anything which is causing noise in here, stopping the psi from bubbling to the surface. Okay, that's my presentation on ego. I love some comments. Is this a bunch of baloney? Does it make sense? We're going to go forward a little bit and give some suggestions on how you might actually apply it. But the basic concept is keep your ego as small as possible. The recommended approach by the trainers, and it seems like a really good idea, is just stay focused on protocol. Just stay focused on protocol. And when you learn, and this will come in time with practice, 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 to see the difference between stuff coming up from the subconscious versus the ego, the AOL-ness, analytical overlay, then you're gone a really long way to getting there. So,
Marty?
Yeah, Russell, go ahead, and yes, let's talk about it. That's fine.
It's Rick from Australia.
Hi, down under.
Yep, down under. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. Just thinking about this in a more simpler form, whereby people who view usually have this expectation, this anticipation. If they lose that, that equates to the ego. Because I think when it's more prevalent is when people are new to remote viewing and they have this expectation. They must hit the target, they must hit the target. But it's not about that. As you said, it's staying in structure. Losing this expectation and anticipation of what is to come and just doing the work equates exactly on par with this ego presentation that you've done.
I agree totally. And let me also say, I am one who has advocated, and I still advocate, that there's a time to set intention, make sure your attention is okay, and have expectation. But once you get into it, once you take that coordinate, all of that should drop away. There's none of that remaining. You've shared that. Your subconscious, in fact, already knows it. I think some people, and I know Tom McNear does this, they don't do anything. They just get down there. They'll take their coordinate. He says he'll put his head down maybe for 10, 15 seconds, take his coordinate and go, because he knows all of these other things are already down in the subconscious. So yes, I agree with you.
Do you know if Tom vocalizes the TRNs or just goes straight in?
Say the other choice. Tom does what?
Does he vocalize the TRNs? Does he say out loud?
I asked him about that, and much to my surprise, he said he does not. And yet I know almost all of the teachers and myself suggest you do vocalize, because you then vocalize it at the feedback session, and I believe that can act as a beacon to get you there.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is what resonates with you, and those in many ways are maybe secondary aspects. But if you do vocalize, maybe that's another thing to keep the ego busy. So if you think of it that way, and that's part of your protocol, fine. So I've come to believe over, and I've been doing this for many, many years now, that what we've now discussed is much, much more fundamental than the details of the protocol per se, whether you vocalize or don't vocalize, whether you use CRV or ERV or ABC technique. It doesn't matter as much as letting the subconscious, allowing the subconscious to give you the information in your conscious mind and get it down on a transcript. I haven't seen too many disagreements now over which technique is better than the other. I think we are past that. But I believe what we've just gone through here and a few more angles to come is much more important than some of the specifics to the protocol. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Russell, you want to?
Yeah, the one thing that's the comment that I had is this. I mean, it's crystal clear to me now that ego plays a significant role, because as soon as I started to do some real world operational sessions that were for the purpose of benefiting another, the quality of my data, like, at least doubled, maybe tripled from practice sessions where my urge is to be right. So when I get into operational sessions now, and it's for the benefit of another, it's just amazing what the difference is. Now, my question for you, so in a financial aspect, of course, money is going to push almost every ego button out there.
Right.
Let's say a person says, okay, I want to be successful at ARV because I want a new car and I want to get a suntan in the Caribbean. And that is their drive. Now they come to the session. How would they suspend, the urge for self-gratification? In other words, having money, or let's say they were trying to get money to fund a lost pet or a shelter. Do you think there could be a difference between the urge for self-gratification and service to others? So if I want a new car and travel the world and have money for quote unquote selfish reasons, it seems like it would be hard to do the archer analogy if you're fundamental. So in other words, I'm trying to differentiate between your urge to have and then the suspension of that during the session.
No, I get what you're saying, and I believe if self-gratification in any form is your primary motivation, it'll be harder to get the ego out of the way.
Right.
If you could get the ego out of the way, I think you still could succeed. However, I do believe doing it for reasons which you personally believe are good. I loved your analogy of doing it, for others, and doing ARV or RV for others and helping them, and you saw a big improvement. And I believe that's because a lot of noise between the subconscious and the ego, there's lots of noise in here, goes away. It's just not relevant during your session. So I've always advocated feeling really good about what you're doing. This is something you're doing. Now, it may be the purpose, hey, there's nothing wrong with money. Having good purposes for it is good. You certainly have to get to that point. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because when you were young, all kinds of money things came in, which is still down in your subconscious. Remember, the subconscious stuff stays there forever. So sometimes you have to get rid of those blocks. But But my main point here is you have to feel, and that's one of the ways to get rid of the blocks, is to really feel strongly that what you're doing is for a good purpose, okay? And the you is the whole you, including your ego. And your ego, then it's okay for it to just focus on the protocol, because it knows that the deep self is going to be giving information which is going to be for the good. Now, the good could be learning more and more about how to communicate with the deep subconscious. It could be about, I'll tell you what mine is. I want to get better and better at this and teach more and more people to do this so that society can become educated in a big way that this is real. Most of society, including most scientists, think this is all junk. I mean, it's sort of crazy, but that is their position. And so I do think each viewer needs to think, why are they doing this? Now, that's true of almost everything. And it should be something which feels good. So nothing wrong about making money. Like precog pros, they've all worked through this. Yeah, they want the money, but they know they're making statements eventually to society as they get better and better. Okay, so I hope I responded in a way that makes sense to you.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I had never thought of a even deeper, broader based platform like I want to bring perception or awareness to people. So I was just thinking how, at the level of how would I use the money for myself or for others. But if you go down to a deeper level, which is my intention and all, I mean, I started remote viewing just because I wanted to learn about clearing my perception, hopefully, in order to see things as they are, more so. So that's good. No, that helped me because I'd never thought of that deeper, more fundamental, broad base of benefiting people. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so let's move on to feedback. And let's get an understanding. And again, for newbies, here was the tasking email, which set off last month's prediction. And it was, will SPI basically tracks the Standard & Poor 500 index divided by 10. So it's called an ETF, but there's groups out there, and that's what they do. They buy and sell to keep it, and it's remarkable how well they do. They're watching the real S&P, and then they buy and sell appropriately. But we use the SPY because we can then trade on its derivatives in either options or futures markets, puts and calls or future markets. So will SPY move up between November 6th and December 3rd? Okay, which was yesterday. And all prices are based on the close. So here there's no stops or limits. Here it's just based on the close. And then we give the start date and the stop date. And then we did this a month ago. People clicked on the link, as you're going to do shortly. And then this is the first time I showed a prediction email. But after the analysis is done, the group manager, in this case that was me for the webinar workshops, makes a group prediction. And I'm going to say now, and I'll probably say again later, the group prediction is really of very secondary importance. What matters is you learning to trust yourself and learning this skill. But obviously, as we get more and more people who are better and better at this, I would expect there to be more on one side to the other, such that we will get a lot of group hits, maybe at a rate which is even higher than the average, let's say, of the good viewers. And that's what we're working towards. So in this case, you can see the prediction comes in with a repeat of the event, and it shows you now, because you didn't know this, all of this was kept only within the computer and was done random. It shows you the yes and no, which is what we do here. And you'll see this goes along with the financials, right? Because if it's going to move up, it's a yes. If it's going to go down, it's going to be a no. And photosite A in this case was associated with yes. Photosite B was associated with no. And I actually made a prediction for yes based on 2 versus 1, which I tend not to do. That was pretty close, but I did it. So I went with the yes. Now let's see what happened. This is a chart, a month-long chart. These are individual days. I don't know if you can read the days, but this is the 6th of November when we started. This happens to be the open high close. It closed at 307.10, which is right here. And notice it was clearly going up, up, up. But the last 2 days, including yesterday, were down days. And we actually came close to going below, but even the low price did not go below the 307.10, and it closed at 309.51. So the change from here to here was up. Maybe I probably should have, even before I showed you this, explained. These are called candle plots. This would be an example of an upside down candle. Notice it even looks like an upside down candle. Here's a candle burning at both ends, perhaps. But the way you read these is if it's red, it opened and then closed lower. So here's a green one. It opened here, closed here. So the open and close is determined by the big broad color. Green is up from the open to the close of that day in this case. They make these down to minutes. But this long candle-like tail extends down to the low of the day. So it opened here. This was the low of the day. That was the high of the day. So it looks like it closed near the high of the day. So that's what these mean. So they give you a lot of information about the day. 2 days ago, it opened up here and it dropped dramatically. The next day, now this looks like, notice this gap here? And those of you who are not all that familiar with the Dow, you might wake up in the morning or the S&P and they'll tell you it was down 100 points. All that happened overnight. These markets trade overnight. So I'm now giving you information about the markets, but let's move on to the feedback. Okay, so in this case, the outcome was yes, which is side 1, and that's photo site A. Here is now, so once I knew that, and I didn't know that until after 1 o'clock yesterday, I, as the group manager, put out a feedback email, which goes to all the members of the group. And this is true of all the other groups as well. And then members of the group would click here. Now, doing a webinar this way, I can get the click to be down here, but that's the same as this. And so to get your feedback, I think I show what happens if you click here. And it'll ask for your email address. And let me put, okay, so you would put an email address in here and you would get that. And some of you who were here last month may want to go ahead and do this, though in my presentational material, I am going to be putting some new information about the hag and even the ego. But nevertheless, one of the big points is the viewer, and that's the whole viewer, including the deep viewer, is in charge. But there it is if you want to use it. And so this is for last month. And then, I don't know if, well, and then, let me see. Okay, so once you do that, you will come up and get a screen, which would be like this one. Now, this is an actual one from last month. But remember, each one is individual. So this happens to be one. Now, you saw that. I let you look at it probably even longer than I would have. But right now, I would like you to put in the chat box what would be called first impression gestalts. What were the big things that you noticed? I want to force you to do that. So go into the chat box and just put in a few words of what you saw as your first impression gestalts. If that doesn't make sense to you, let me know. But when you first look at a picture, in fact, they've done studies where they've shown pictures for like milliseconds where you really couldn't really look at it, certainly in any intellectual sense, or analyze it. And people can get impressions from it, maybe major colors, stuff like that. None of you want to do that? Go ahead, be brave. Don't let your ego stop you. Be brave. Because it turns out first impression gestalts are one of the things that the sub picks up right away. As I said, they've done experiments where you almost can't see a picture, and yet people could give responses to it. Ugly brown. Wildlike. Very good. Any others? Yeah, I'm going to give you another look. Did you get anything else? Okay, now at feedback time, okay, very good, Tony. At feedback time, you now have the ability to look at the target for a long time, and you still can get impressions of what the gestalt, what's going on here overall. I liked your ugly and brown. This certainly does look ugly, a lot of brown. Hard work, yep. This one here looks like she's working hard. You also get the whole idea of people, maybe outside, unhappy, especially when you read they're trying to prevent them from getting food after there was a volcano eruption. Now, let me show you. Now, you've seen this, you've gotten your first impressions. Let me show you a precognitive one that Karen did. So maybe it wasn't fair that this is yours, Karen. You got a nice hit, and I want to take you through. She gave it a 3.5. I would like to take you through the way Hag, right, the harsh analytical approach, would do this. So there's the picture. Now remember, this would have been done at analysis time, but at feedback time, you can actually, since you have both of these, you can both look at how well was your analysis, Now that I know it's the correct one, might I have done something different? Okay. Here's what I did, and I'm trying to show you, and others might do it differently. First of all, I couldn't read this word, which is not good. Do you know what that word was? Why don't you might want to make comments as I go through this, Karen. So you want to turn off your mic, or you can just use it. Clear. Okay, that could be right. I couldn't read it. I didn't mark it. It doesn't look like it would go. But notice what I did mark. Brown. And notice how I'm marking it. I'm marking it with a capital A. And I questioned whether I should even use little a's because this is supposed to be harsh. And I don't really know if this is really mud. But I did this A partially because pretty darn close to mud. I mean, I could see where subconscious would call it mud, but also because it then had the feeling of being outside. But I marked it as a little a. And when we do our counting, a big A will count as 1, a little a will count as a half. So notice here is icky, licky. And this is certainly icky. Far away. I think it's clear that's a faraway sight. Liberation, liberated. I mean, for a word like that to come in, while it's not really what's going on here, though maybe she is being it, I felt that they were looking to get food and stuff like that, but it wasn't right on, so I gave it a little A. And again, if you were to judge this, you might do it differently. What I'm trying to show you is the methodology more than anything else. Ugly, A. I would not stay long. That was, I thought, pretty wonderful. And these others I didn't think matched. Sitting on the ground, viewer, I didn't particularly understand. I think that meant sitting on the ground, somebody was watching, or was it her? I didn't know. And then clicking, I don't know. There were some others that I thought came close, but I didn't mark them. So this is my personal choice. Somebody else did this. There'd probably be some overlap and some differences. Now, how do we score this? First of all, let's notice just at this stage that the total count for photo site A were 7. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh yeah, because the A's count as a half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5, 6.5, 7. So in terms of what's called the A count, there are 7 of them because I used little a's. And some of you may not want. You may want to be harsher than I am. And as time goes on, I may even get harsher. But the total matched data count is actually 8 because the little a's count as a data match. So I thought enough of this to say that this should be counted as a data match. So remember that because that's going to come in our arithmetic. Now, notice what's changed. We're now talking about the first impression gestalts. Joe McMonagle was the first one which made a big deal of it, in at least to me. And he thinks it should count as much as half of the ranking. We talked about the 0 to 7 ranking, half of that. And so you need to mark which are the first impression gestalts. And so I've marked them here, and you can see here an AF, an AF, an AF. Here, I decided that these were the same. And again, you might want to count them differently, but I just gave them sort of 3 in my mind, that I had these 3 gestalts. Brown is a gestalt here. The icky, yicky, ugly is a gestalt here. And I would not stay here long. I felt that was a really good gestalt. And it's like an emotional gestalt, but that's certainly a gestalt. Okay, so you need to come up with the first impression gestalt. I use FIG rather than G, just to emphasize this is the first impression gestalt, big picture. And I gave it a 0.6, just because I thought there were some major things which are missing. There was nothing about the people, and there was nothing about action. But you certainly got a lot of other things. And so I gave it a 0.6. You might give it something else, but I gave it a 0.6. So now let's take a look at what that means. I'm going to do the arithmetic. Okay, so this is the way I judged it. Let me summarize HAG, and then, because it shows the arithmetic, and then we'll do the arithmetic. And it really is just simple arithmetic. So here's a rough history. Russell Targ and his group at SRI developed a 0 to 7 confidence ranking system, and I will be showing you that when we do analysis. Then Joe McMonagle added the concept of gestalts being worth half of the analysis, and so he did arithmetic, which made that happen. And then Tom McNear added this harsh concept, and he says in a nice way, and it modifies the denominator, which I'm now going to show you in the count ratio. So it really does the arithmetic differently. So first I'm going to show you TARG. 0 to 7, 2, 0, no correspondence, 1, little correspondence. 2 is some correct elements. I've said this so much I get bored with it myself, and I know some of you know it, but I think we need to go through it because some newbies might be looking at this. This is like random. You put in a random color, and that's all you get. You draw a line, and there are no other matches, and you got some matches, but nothing really good. 3 is a mixture of correct and incorrect elements, but enough of the former to indicate the viewer has made contact with the target. So 3 is right at the edge of making contact. 4 is good correspondence. Now you say, yay, there's really some good correspondence here with several matchable elements, but still intermixed with some incorrect information. We consider a 3.5 to be wagerable, away from just the margin of there, yes, got psychic information, but So 3.5, if you put a 3.5 down, that says you believe that this is, wagerable. You'd be willing to invest a few bucks, say. A 5, using words as good correspondence with unambiguous, unique, matchable elements, and still some incorrect information. But the words unambiguous, unique clearly raise the bar. And then 6 and 7 get into the analytical information. When you get those AOLs, you write them down on the right side of the paper is what's usually recommended, and I certainly recommend that as well. Get it down on the paper. That gets rid of it, lets you go on for other information. But sometimes that information is right on, and you might name the target, which is an analytical function, or you might name the function of the target. So TARG made those 6 and 7. With HAG, we do the count like always, but the count is, let's look at the word here. Harsh, especially rigorous, assiduous, judicious, and discerning when assessing the correlation of data elements to possible target A. So you saw what I did with that, and that's the first step in HAG, but he wants you to be harsh. And then you do the same thing with B. So this is pretty standard, actually, except for being super harsh. And then the same thing with the gestalts, where the gestalts have a maximum of 1, a minimum of 0, if there are no matches at all. If you're right on and you got all the first impression gestalts, you give it a 1. And you saw how I roughly came up with 0.6. And harsh means ungentle, unpleasant. Yeah, you have to make some hard choices. Now, here's where the arithmetic begins to come in. You count up only the data elements you have labeled as A and B, and use the sum of these data elements as the denominator to your scoring formula. Those data elements not labeled A or B should not be incorporated into the total. With Joe's approach, you would use every single one of the data elements, even the ones that were ignored. So this is the arithmetic. The confidence ranking is the fig, right? We had a 0.6 there. And then the ratio of the number of elements which are marked as A, that would be true in both Joe's and Tom's harsh element approach, but the divisor is different. This is different because it's just the total number labeled A or little a plus the total number labeled B or little b. In our example, we got no B's. And I actually looked at her second one, and she ranked it as a 0, and indeed there were no B's. Okay, now the arithmetic in the example that I did. You know, there's a lot of information here, but it all comes down, it all comes down to here. Okay, I'm humming because I thought I had changed the color of this, but obviously I didn't. Sorry. Notice now, here is the formula. It's the fig, which was 0.6, right, down here. So there's the 0.6 plus the total number of matches. Now this is where we brought in the halves, and we got the 7, but the total count was 8, because in terms of total count, we count the fact that these were marked and we ignore all the rest. And so the arithmetic is 0.6 plus 7/8, which turns out to be 1.475. We multiply by 3.5. Now, why 3.5? Because this plus this can be a maximum of 2. If you had a perfect fig, that'd be 1. And if you matched, and you could have 8 out of 8 elements. For example, in fact, if I took out the little a's, that would what I've had here. Notice in this case, that led to 5.16, which gave a ranking of A. So I, using harsh, actually came up with a higher score than Karen did. She gave herself a 3.5. I think this is one of the first ones she ever did. You can't hear me. Can everybody else hear me? Barbara, I think it's at your end, or others would have complained. Just verify that, that the rest of you are hearing me. Okay, good. Yes, and let's say Brown would have come in here again. I would mark it again as a brown, because your subconscious is saying, yep, there's a lot of brown here, so mark it again. But in terms of a fig, it would just be, brown would be 1 fig. That was sort of what I tried to show here. right? Because brown's the fig, but I would count it as an A element twice because the sub said, you know what, there's brown there. Let's see if there are other questions, and that's good. Okay, Karen. Barbara, good. Great. Okay. So hopefully because you're going to be doing this, and as I say, it's, after you do it a few times, it actually becomes pretty straightforward because you've marked a certain number of these, and then you have to identify which ones are figs, and then you have to come up with that ratio. And the ratio should be related, I believe, to, if they missed certain things, how significant were they? This is probably where the biggest judgment comes in. And, we keep wanting to call it analysis, and I believe that's appropriate because judgment is way too ego oriented. And there is some intuition in this, how well from 0 to 1 did the viewer capture the gestalts? And my judgment was 0.6, noticing they missed some here, but got, some here. Okay. What do you do when you get a hit? You encourage more hits by celebrating. Enjoy feeling really good. Notice all the matches in the transcript. Do a quick session with matches plus a little more. And I really want to emphasize this deeply happy. It's not the ego who is going to be happy. I do believe celebrating, nothing wrong with that. But be very clear that the ego was only a part, and actually a small part, of what was going on. It was your consciousness, your sub, and the UCC, all of that, which was what had and made the hit occur. So, okay. But again, the part of it being deep, I think is very important. And this is new. I just never emphasized that before. Nothing wrong with giving your sub lots of credit. Share that happiness all the way down. And with it, never stop learning. And again, that comes primarily from the way down. It's your sub that's really happy. Hey, this was great. I see what I did better. And I also think it would have been good had I done the following, and you might take the moment to add something. I always like people to add something they miss, like the people in that last one. What would the people have felt like? Not the ego just saying, hey, I miss people. Just the opposite of that. Hey, how can I get people next time? How does the fact that there are people there who are moving around feel? That's the way you keep learning, and you use your sub in a happy, positive way. The other thing where I want to do feedback, and this is leaning, well, okay, we're now talking about the next level kind of down in terms of hits. This is not a hit, but it's what I call a high CR pass. And that is, let's say you had 2, and it's amazing that this happens, and that's one of the things we're trying to get over, so that viewers will only look at the actual target. But at least now we're at the stage where I see this too often. It may be 4, but they're the same, but they're reasonably high. Do a feedback session on the target. You'll only be seeing 1, And you can give yourself credit for that, and knowing there's nothing wrong with passes because there's still something to learn for the viewer and possibly the analyst. The viewer may only see one target if there's an independent judge, but the analyst has seen both, and he can muse on that a little bit. So these are always times to learn something. Now, I want you to notice I have not said anything about feedback for misses. I didn't even make a view graph about feedback for misses. Bottom line, I am now coming to a point of view, and again, the viewer's in charge, so you're going to have to see if this resonates with you or not, that ignoring misses is the best way to deal with them. I used to recommend there was stuff you could learn, you add, but having done it myself and having seen the response of other people, both when I independent judge them or just when they talk to me, it's negative. It's just feeding negativity into the system. How can you not feel negative? I think it's just too hard work to get something positive out of a miss. So I think you just move on. Hey, I'm happy I did that session. And you move on to the next one. And the same thing for low passes. Why do a feedback session if all you got was a few matches, which were probably random? So I would say don't even do feedback then. Just move on knowing you're working in a cutting edge field, and you might review quickly what happened to see if you can identify where you were out of protocol. Was your ego not doing what it was supposed to be doing? Often you can identify reasons, but sometimes you can't, and just move on. Now, before we do a new prediction and related to the feedback, I believe that these hit rate charts, which there's a link to your personal one when you do a personal session. The very last thing after you do your feedback session and put in your notes, there's a link for this. And this shows your cumulative hit rate. I think the hit rate is obvious. It's the number of hits up to a certain session number divided by the number of hits plus misses. Passes are ignored. So it's hits divided by hits plus misses. The red curve is cumulative. So this person started out like 100%, went down to 40%, and cumulative after 138, whatever it is, trials is at 58%. That's the red curve. Now, to get a finer look at this, we have this blue curve, which is a 10-day moving average, passes ignored. So it's just what it said. You take the last 10 non-pass predictions and you calculate a hit rate for that. And notice it, of course, jumps between all the 10s. This person got up to 80%, dropped down to 10%. Major pause here, because this is the strongest evidence that the ego is a major player in this, and not only within one session. You know, we want to set the ego into its limited role of paying attention to the protocol within one session. But I think this shows very clearly. And we see it way too often that when a person is doing really well, it goes way down. Millions of hypotheses. Fear of success. Am I really this good? Starting to get in my head. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. And it's thinking too much in the next sessions that follow. But even fear of success, here he's been successful. Oh my God. What happens if I get to 100%? That's clearly going to change my life. Not only if I'm a precog pro, am I going to be able to make a lot of money? Am I ready for that? Am I really that good? I think it's fear in one form or another. But this is a perfect example of it. And that's why I call it quantitative measure, biofeedback, because you can watch yourself, and a kind of a watchdog. When this went down to here, this person, and I think now they're beginning to do it. Watch this. Went up to 90% here, again had the drop. Okay, but didn't go down as far. Now got back to 80, and notice the oscillations in the 10-day are much smaller. Very significant. The next step is to raise all of that. And what I use and what I consider actually to be the most important measure is the 25-day moving average. So, this is when the person reached their first 25. And of course, it matches with the cumulative because it's the same arithmetic at that point. But then as you go on, they differ because now I'm only using the last 25 and I'm ignoring, some of these. And notice the 25, because of this dip, did go all the way down to 40%, but came up to 75%, went down to like 58%, and now looks like it's leveling off between 60 and 70%. Precog pros, to go to what we call the next level, where they start earning at a higher rate, need to get up to like the 75%, 72% and above. This person is very close. But the most significant thing about this is lack of these big oscillations, being more reliable. Okay, so learning that is the key. Questions about the feedback or the HAG or anything else I put out here? Okay. It's sort of interesting. I'm sort of paying it. Someone has something to say. Paying attention to my own doing this, and it's not linear, and that's because the subconscious is not linear. I'd like to think I'm teaching this to the deep subconscious as well, so that it gets it, because it's the one who is doing the important work, and the context that that's in, I think is important to it. Okay, new prediction for about a month. Ready for that? No questions, comments? So we're about to go into a prediction. We've been doing this for a while. I think it's always good before you go into a new prediction to kind of loosen up a little bit. And I'm going to loosen you up first mentally, but I think also physically. That'll be good to do. And be confident. I mean, the fact that what we're doing is, I don't even want to say possible, but been done for a long time, goes back to biblical ages. Carl Jung, psychotherapist, something in us sees around corners I love that expression, and knows beyond time and space. I mean, so what you're playing with, even though most people don't believe it, many respectable, well-known people know it is true. And our job now is to make it reliably true. I'd like to think up to the 75 plus higher % hit rate level. But again, when you're doing all of this, all that gets set aside. Okay, one of the key elements here is describe, don't analyze. These little stars indicate they came from Tom, so I stole some of his slides from the conference presentation he gave in Vegas. So describe, don't analyze. Oh, yeah, I see rounded orange texture. Ooh, could it be an orange? That'd be an AOL. Firm yet pliable, less dense on the inside. Aha, must be a basketball. No, that's your ego. That's an AOL. What about smells? What about tastes? Maybe you put something down which indeed would lead you, the analyst, to say it's a pumpkin. You know, pumpkins and basketballs don't look very different, but they're distinguishing elements. But that's not up to the remote viewer to decide. Don't make those kind of judgments. Don't name. Just stick with the kind of low-level information the sub gives you most of the time in its description and its sketches. A circle-like sketch here would be great. Put a little something off the top, be even better. But even the circle, that's the kind of stuff that your sub will give you. Analyze, ego. Here's Tom's excellent, I think, summary for improving the remote viewing session. Don't overcomplicate the process. Keep it as simple as possible. Come up with a protocol and don't overcomplicate it. Focus on session structure. He emphasizes that over and over. Guess who focuses on session structure? The ego. I know you're probably getting sick of hearing that, but that's the very important message. The conscious mind, the ego mind, focuses on structure, where to put the data in the session structure. Now, different teachers teach it in different ways. Some people are self-taught. But after doing several sessions, you will have come up with your structure. And yeah, it might change in minor ways from time to time because you feel that's appropriate. But you have your session structure. You do things the same way. That's where the conscious mind, the now conscious mind, the ego mind keeps its focus. Yes, I want to do this. I want to go left and right on the page, putting my figures, where they come in, starting a new line, whatever structure you have. And the subconscious mind receives the data, I would think, from a place like the UCC, and then shares it with the conscious mind, and then you write it on the transcript, but don't do any self-editing. Just put down what you get from your subconscious that goes to your conscious mind. If data is out of structure, consider what he calls an AOL break. And he uses the word AOL break. You can consider out of structure break, whatever. Typically, put down your pen, wait. He indicated, again, 15, 30 seconds, but you may want to get up and have a cup of coffee and come back, depending on how you feel. But there are times when you should take a break. And if it's correct, in other words, if you felt it was an AOL, but indeed it wasn't, um, it'll come back. Brown will come back a second time, maybe the first time you thought it was an AOL because of something that came before. But it'll come back if it's correct. Have that kind of confidence. Now, CRVers and a fair number of our people, I don't know what percentage, have taken CRV courses from one of the trainers. Lynn Buchanan has done a lot, Lori, Paul Smith, and there are others who came to it a bit later, and I don't even know all their names, but I know they're out there. They took kind of the original CRV, and Tom has a manual out on that, and started teaching it. Okay, and in those terms, that protocol, which Ego is going to watch, is what are called stages 1 through stage 3. And maybe he thinks a little bit into stage 4, which all of that ought to fit on 1 or 2 pages. This, for ARV, doesn't take all that long. And it's just enough to distinguish between 2 photos, which are quite different. But you need, 1 page of information. You saw a transcript that had 1 page of information and it got a 5, and it was a hit. Now, for other protocols, you need to know your own structure and just be sure to stick to it with your ego paying attention that indeed you do that. And, if you haven't really thought about this and you're brand new, the idea of going left to right and down the page, and this turns out to be useful for the analysis phase. When you do the analysis, or if you have an independent analyst, knowing how the information comes in is important, because sometimes it like clusters, and then there might be some information, then another cluster of information which matches the possible target. So, but it's the ego's job to make sure you stay with your structure. Okay, so here again, I've said it, it's the ego's job to make sure you stay in your structure. And this is left hemisphere conscious mind, right hemisphere subconscious mind. We really do have 2 hemispheres. There's a great video which actually shows that in a woman who lost a major part of her left hemisphere with a major tumor. It's a marvelous video. And she went just into this, and she went in la la land. She couldn't function. It was very hard for her to function. This is what keeps you going in the physical world, but this is where your RV data comes from. So ESP is occurring in all of us. Externalizing what is occurring brings it into awareness, putting it on your transcript. Now, I believe the primary benefit of ARV and applying precognition is creating a strong working relationship with your subconscious mind. I don't know what you call it. Other people might call it the higher self, the matrix, the UCC. It's these non-physical aspects of us, the spiritual, your soul. It's the deepest kind of words that we have, which are hard to define and don't even need definition, and yet you have a sense that they're there, or you wouldn't be here. It's setting up a communication channel with that, the deepest part of yourself. That's kind of amazing. That's a wonderful objective. And that's what ARV, I believe, does very well, because of just the way it's structured. Okay, you're now seeing the actual tasking that we're going to be doing. So I put this out yesterday, and some people in the group, one person actually has already done it, though my hope is more people, will do it here. And if you want to be a member of this group, you just send me an email and ask, and I'll put you in there so that you'll be able to see these even if you can't attend. So here it is. Will the SPY move up? And notice I'm again taking about a month. So it's the same as before, except the dates are different. And I'm sticking with that. A lot of this month-long stuff started with a many-month prediction of will Hillary Clinton win the it must have been the 2016 election. And we got no, and everybody thought we were crazy. But that turned out to be a hit. But I don't really like to do those, and I've stopped doing them because what I call those are onesies. One of the things we know is we have an edge over chance. And that's why doing financials and sports are the key. So that's why I keep doing financials. So you would click this. I'm about to click this one. And again, you would put your name in here. And I guess I don't want, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. So you put your name in here because what's about to come up now is this page, which has my personal coordinate in it. You can get your personal coordinate, and you oldies are welcome to start. I'm going to do a little bit more description and then give 10 minutes. So you can have more than 10 minutes if you wish to. So let me put this in the text box. The one I want to put in the text box, however, is this one. Okay. So I'll put that there. So all of you should have the same link you would have in sort of the normal tasking. So this is the first tasking, and the 107 is the end date, and this is just something for the database, which you don't have to worry about. Okay, now let's go back here, and I'd like to get the newbies. So based on this, and you'll get to this point, you'll do an RV session. Now, what does that mean? Well, I actually have, and you saw it very briefly, a page like this, which some people still use, and you may want to use it, which is like a reminder, or you might touch it. Some people still use a technique where they'll touch it to come up with a texture. Touch it, see what comes to mind. That's part of their protocol. And most people use a blank page like this, which starts with, you put the coordinate at the top. So you should put your personal coordinate here, name, date, time over here. I was and still recommend saying it out loud and then saying it out loud at feedback time. And typically we start things, and I say we, most of the formal approaches have what's called the coordinate dash ideogram. And it's like you write the coordinate and then you do something, takes 1 or 2 or 3 seconds, and it contains information internally if it's an ideogram, but you go for the feeling of it. But some people do view it as a pictogram. People use different techniques. But whatever your technique is, this is what starts it all off. And then you put your gestalts usually come up first. In this other approach, they would go here. But the analytical overlays always go on the right. And I added the word trash because it's really important to put it down, because it then releases that so that you can go get new information from your subconscious. So that's the idea there. The Joe McMonagle and Ed May, researchers for a long time, one of the best remote viewers around. Ed May is a scientist who's been with the project, Stargate Plus for a very long time, point out the importance of intention, attention, and expectation. And I believe that gets set kind of all along. Your intention is to describe and sketch that coordinate. The ego you is paying attention to the protocol, and all of you is expecting to do well as you're approaching this. When you get in it, your sub knows all of this, and the training that you're doing to go to this next level of hit rate is to basically trust it. It knows what your intention, and expectation is. It knows you want to describe whatever your coordinate is, that feedback target. So minimize your ego. See how I made it smaller? That's the I ego there. The ego's job is just to pay attention to the protocol. If you're saying what's going on out loud, fine. If that's part of your protocol, that'll be its job to make sure you continue doing that. So we're getting ready to do this. The standard cue with your coordinate. Joe McMonagle actually said he thinks roughly this cool down period before you start, and maybe that includes what we're doing now, I don't know, is 75% of the discipline. Some CRVers, including Tom, don't even do a cool down. They just jump in. But for them, possibly doing the coordinate and dropping the ego is their cool down. Because that's the purpose of the cool down, is to get into a place where you're in touch with your subconscious. Now notice I'm using all of these words. Do it is the key here. And I'm about to turn on, the Monroe Institute has some background quieting binaural bits, stuff that helps relaxation, helps the cool down process. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, 2 or 5 if you use a cool down. If you feel you need to get rid of the day-to-day stuff, I suggest just focusing on your breathing and let the day-to-day stuff which your ego has been working to just sort of float out of you. Go back and focus on your breathing. Focus on your breathing. At about 2 minutes, this hemi-sync tape, a narrator will come on and remind you to go even deeper, turn inward. go down to the deepest part of their subs, and then get that information. Here I use the word witness it, and write and draw in your transcript. Okay, so a little bit, get ready, and here comes the hemisync, and I will bring you back when there's like a minute to go. You've got 1 minute to go. Hmm. Okay, folks, why don't you stretch? If you haven't already finished your session, write EOS for end of session on the bottom or end, and come on back to a more, quote, normal state. Were you able to hear the hemisync music? It's not really music, but sounds 4 times. Yeah, and Barbara, I see what you're saying. Okay, you guys back with me? You hearing me okay? You did not hear it. Very strange. I'm using a headphone here, and I didn't hear it either. I'll have to do something about that. When I don't use the earphone, it comes through loud and clear. Okay, well, silence works. A lot of people prefer to do it in silence anyway. So, excuse me. Did you manage your egos? let's see. That was, I don't know. I sort of felt like that was an appropriate rhetorical question. So the next step now, bringing you back into a more normal state, the analysis process is mostly done with the intellect, done with the ego, but there is definitely a touch of intuition involved. Is this a good match? Isn't this a good match? So let's get into that. So it's the yes/no question with 2 possible targets. The way you get your personal 2 possible targets is to go back to where you got your coordinate. In fact, it might still be on your machine. Now what you must do is using your smartphone, using some sort of copier, which will load it onto your computer, get it on your computer so that you can then get to see the 2 possible ones. But I don't know how else to tell you this. It's right here. You are now right at this step. So you need to upload your transcript. You've now developed this transcript. Let's go ahead and match it to what's going to become the ultimate target. Okay. A lot of people have, scanners. or other kinds of devices to do this. So that's your next step. And I'm assuming that's what you're doing. I'm looking at the chat box, I don't see any. Somebody's having difficulty. I might be able to help him, but okay. Yeah. So once once you get the two possible ones in front of you, I will now just review the HAG approach for analysis while you're doing it. I think most of you probably already have it, but that'll keep me busy while you go ahead and do it. Okay. And as you saw, photo site A will come up first big. And then for photo site A, you come up with a 0 to 7. And the way we recommend doing that now is using HAG, where you are harsh. You know, lots of times people will stretch. If there's a hint of stretching, don't mark it. I think this also has the good psychological the benefit of indicating to your sub that you just want to have really good information more and more. And have no fear, you know, your sub will give you that. And then for all of the matches, put an A next to the matches or a little a if it's still harsh, but you think it ought to be there. And eventually you'll do that for B. And then, or even after you do A, you might get the gestalts for A, and you need the gestalts for B as well. And then here, I'll leave this one up as a reminder of what we did, where we mark and count. So the fig is between 0 and 1. And remember, you're going to come up with a confidence ranking for A and a confidence ranking for B. And then the ratio, how many matches did you get? Counting in terms of matches, half matches, but the divisor is the total matched between A and B. Here, B was 0, so you couldn't count them all. But on your transcript, you'll have generally some B's as well. And the divider here, divider number here, divisor, is the total number of A elements plus the total number of B elements. And take your time. Remember, this is the step where an investment might be made. This would be the page where, when you're ready, you will put in your 0 to 7 confidence ranking for A and for B. And, well, actually, yeah, and put in your comments. So this is the formula. Total number of labeled A plus labeled B for the ratio here. And then, of course, the fig is 0 plus 1. Add those up and multiply by 3.5. Okay, so no questions, no comments. I'm going to go over now and do my thing. And let's see. Now, as a group manager, I have access to the predictions that you put in. And we can look at them and talk about them. And then I will make a group prediction and then some closing remarks. That's the plan. So we're going for webinar. Let's make sure. 12:4 to 1:7. Okay. Well, we only have 3 people who took coordinates. Tony, teal analysis. I mean, if there's some reason the rest of you didn't, please let me know. There's certainly no obligation to do so. And you're happy to watch what some other people did, but why not jump in yourself? Karen, you didn't do one this time. Oh, is that because of your computer or something? At least I don't see it here. Okay, well, okay, I'm looking at the chat box. No questions. Okay, so we do have one here. Oh, we've got two now. Okay, that's great. This is what the group manager would see. And you know what would be interesting? We have one 3.5 and a 0 and a 5 and a 3. So what do I want to do? You know, both Teal and Tony, if you don't mind, you should have a transcript now that's marked up. How about emailing that to me? It'd be interesting to see that. If you want to or can. Don't feel obligated again. But what I will do is, let's take a look at Tony, who gave a 5 to side 2. So here's Tony's transcript. Okay, so there's the transcript. Tony's transcript. And here for 2, let's just look at, okay, so there is that. Now, to get them both on the screen at the same time, I could do that this way. Okay, so we've got that. Server. Okay. Tony, maybe you can just, well, here, I can even look at it, but very clear. You got the water was great. Wave it. What does that mean to you?
It was waves.
Oh, waves. That's an S. Oh my.
Yeah.
That's
Just kind of
very
scribbling
nice. Okay. And okay, so you use this approach of putting down the possibles. Gritty, flat, hard, cool, long, rounded. What is that word?
And rounded edges.
Rounded
Rounded
edges, calm. Interesting. And so water just came in as an AOL.
Yeah. And so what was interesting I kind of lean towards, if you look at my ideogram, I put under it water or energy was the first thing that came to mind.
Right.
So that's kind of how I scored it high on the fig because of that.
Well, and that certainly makes sense. Water, energy. Did you get
So the dry
person?
doesn't seem to fit in there.
Right. So you didn't get
I
person.
did not get a
Again,
person.
that is very common. And sometimes they'll miss a major thing and get everything else, but that's pretty good. So what did you give yourself as a fig for this?
I gave myself a 1 because I had the water and the waves and the energy.
Okay.
Maybe that was high, but that's how I ended up with a 5.
Okay. Again, the viewer's in charge. Your own experience as you keep watching this is going to teach you if that approach is better than subtracting a little because you missed the person.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't know. And what matters is how you do. And how many of these other words did you get? Certainly not dry, dusty.
No.
Flat. Yeah.
Well, I got, the board. The board is flat.
Right. And it's smooth.
Um,
And it's a bit underneath the water and it's hard. So you marked almost all of these?
Yep.
It's not gritty.
No, and what's interesting, and I actually put a note in there in my notes, there might have been displacement because the other image was some sort of a ruin. It looked kind of like a pyramid. It had sand dunes all around it. So when I first saw that as A, it's like, oh, this probably is it. And then I started adding everything up. Like, well, no, because it's not the water. It's not
Right.
energy motion.
But you did, I think, if I remember, you gave it a 3. And that's
Yeah.
perfect. You have to judge, and this is so important to all. You have to judge them both totally independently.
Yeah, because there were definitely a lot of elements, the dust and the dry.
Right.
But it didn't have rounded edges. It didn't,
Right.
some of
And
the colors were the same. So that's
and
why
long, yeah. And you marked long?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Okay. It's hard to disagree. If you use the technique, it works pretty well. And the fact you gave it such a high fig, that's okay. Let me open up another one. And if anybody else wants to comment on these, these are very informal sessions, just designed for one thing, and that's to learn. So, wait, I need to get back to what happened here. Oh, did I get rid of? I think I did. Okay. It looks like I didn't just close out the picture, I closed out everything. So let's go back here. That was the first one. Okay, so we did Tony. See, so interesting. And this is such a big challenge. The big challenge for me in terms of, and all group managers, here's another 5, but it's on the other side. Okay, let's look at Alice's. Now, remember, nobody is at 100%, so this is understandable. It's just that as a group manager is going to make a decision, I would certainly like them all to be on the same side. Okay, so you did, because that makes my job easier. So I guess that's selfish. That's ego selfish. Okay, side one. Alice. Okay, so first let's do your transcript. Okay, so we have the transcript, and I can bring it on half a page. And now let's get that, which again, I'll just snip this, put it over here. Hi, Alice. Do you have a mic that works or not?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you beautifully.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, so why don't you take us through, basically the logic? What was your fig for this one? And
Okay, my fig was that rectangle drawing.
yeah.
That's like a ideogram for me. That means it's like looking out a window.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like I'm viewing something, an open. It's like a frame around an open space,
Ah,
like looking out a window. And I immediately I AOL'd that I was looking at outer space, but I felt that was a bit much, so I put that under AOL.
uh-huh.
But so that's like a view finder, and I'm looking at open space, and I wrote view. So those all went for A. And then I got like a bumpy or lumpy kind of texture, which if you look at the picture closely enough, that the bricks do make a lumpy thing.
Yep, yep.
I did not count that diagonal. I just got like a diagonal movement or feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the drawing underneath is like a little light bulb or that some kind of light is shining.
What did you do with that? Did you make that a fig or just a match or what?
I just called it a match for A.
Yeah, that's very good.
At least
Mm-hmm.
it was circular.
Correct.
And then somehow I got these colors that I saw. I asked, are there any colors? And I got, which I often do this in my viewing. I get this dirt, dark brown, like my face is down on the dirt, and I never know. So I wrote it down. But yeah, I don't feel very good about colors. At the very end, if you skip to the very end, I later on got a light area that looked kind of pink and white. So that
Okay.
was a little more like it.
And you marked brown too, right?
I marked brown. Yeah, I think I gave it a little A. Yeah, I gave it a little A.
Yeah.
And then the dark and the black, I gave that over to the photosite B.
Okay, now let's just talk about this one. Okay, so what fig did you give it?
I gave it 0.7 because
Okay,
I
open
would have liked,
space.
I would have liked that first ideogram to be more of a circle instead of a rectangle.
No, ideograms, at least most
I knew what
people
it meant.
say the
Yeah.
shape doesn't matter. You go by the feel, and that's just what you did, open space,
Okay.
which is interesting. A 0.7, and then now when you add it up for the denominator of the ratio, all of the A's and B's that were marked, correct?
Yes, I counted 16 A's and B's,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave the A's 12.5 of them.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Let's look at the last one. Did I close it again? I think as I get older, I get stupider. In terms of doing things which are like automatic, it's very strange. So I did it twice. We have one more, which I want to look at. Oh, I know. You know, I should use Google closes them all. It turns out the Microsoft browser does not. Here. Okay, what did I do here? Okay, so now let's look at teal. Interesting teal. 3.5 and a 0.
Yeah.
And let's go. And first
I
we'll get.
don't know how to analyze my stuff.
Well, that's why you're here, and maybe we'll help you here.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting transcript.
No, I don't write much. If I stop to write, I kind of break my connection, I find. I think I need to do it afterwards, maybe. You know, like I can't
Okay.
connect beforehand. I need to draw.
I know a lot of people who just do pictures. So don't play yourself down, especially if it's good matches.
Okay.
So let's take a look. But afterwards, if there were words that make sense, but not from analyzing it, the words that sort of came up while you were drawing. You know what I mean? You have to come from the
Yeah.
sub.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're down here. And you went with the first one, Photoset?
Yeah. I went with the first one because of the last thing that I drew.
Okay. So
And I
now,
it's a kind of like the center. It's in between what looks like X's. It looks almost like a fence. I don't know. Once
this
I
is
start
the right
drawing,
one though, the candle?
Yeah, the candle's the right one. It was a
Okay.
candle, and I think it was a town. Looked like a festival or something, the other one.
Okay, so let's do the candle. This part worked well. We'll just put that there. And here's your transcript.
Yeah, so in the center, where it kind of looks like a crayon.
Yeah, right
That
here.
was the last thing that I drew. I mean, sometimes I do lines just to kind of almost put myself in a trance. You know, I'll start like just going back and forth with lines. The second last thing was the flow, the ribbon kind of the flow, and
What is
the
this
eyes.
circle? What is this circle here?
Wait, when if I actually get like an up or a down or you know, I write it in there afterwards.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't part of the transcript.
Yeah, no.
Okay, now these circles, no should have. That's fine. That's your approach.
Yeah.
And it's above this line, so that's fine. Cat's eyes. Yeah, you got a lot of eyes, but the eyes are circular.
Yeah, they're not like cats, so I don't know where that was.
But there is a circle here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the bottom of the candle is a circle. You see, you have clearly multiple, but there's only one.
I know. That's why I was like, the other picture was a parade with a bunch of people on the street. So that's why I went, I don't know, maybe I made a mistake here. I mean, I felt people.
Why did you give yourself a 0 for the other?
Yeah.
No, you should never, ever do that.
Okay.
Well, just because. I mean, here you've got eyes, so you should have marked those with a B.
Yeah.
So you didn't do the A-B approach, I take it.
No, I'm still having trouble with that.
Well, and let me tell you, with sketches, though I had one the other day, which was very good, and so it was very easy. You could break up the elements. Like here, this would be a really strong A, and I'd even make that a fig.
Yeah.
You see, right? For this one.
Yeah.
The only other thing that matches that, you see, because all of these are different elements, right?
Yeah.
You have clearly different elements in here.
Yeah.
And but that's a good one for this. But none of the rest of, and maybe I can give you a little A for round, but that might be stretching. You know what I mean? Down here.
Yeah.
Now the other one was a festival with many people, which were many
Yeah.
multiples
Yeah.
plus eyes. Were there any trees or stuff like that in
There
the
was like
festival?
some trees. There was like a street. It looked like a street, and it was there was buildings and trees
know
on each
what?
side and
This
people.
is
I think.
this
Can you
is
get it?
yes.
Okay,
And
because
since we're all just trying to learn here, let
yeah,
me
and I
get
have a very bad memory, so
yeah, no, let me get that, because based on what you said,
I know. I'm
it
like
looks a
looking
lot
at it
more like it should be the other one.
because honestly, I thought we were supposed to do this before, so that's why I handed it in right away, and I did it really fast. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to have this done before 3. So I did it really quickly, and I might have like erred on my analysis.
Well, that's okay. You're learning, and what's nice is at home, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Okay, so right, so that should be the candle, and this is Alice. No, it's teal.
Yes.
You're down here, so here's B. Right.
Okay. Right.
So
See,
there's the
so
festival. Let's take a look at it. And I think other people, it's not like I am a total master of this, so other people should feel free. Okay. Wow. You have cats and dogs, no people, but you have a lot of eyes,
yeah.
but you don't really see the eyes there.
No, it's not like my usual where I go, oh yeah, like I
Yeah.
like the curves usually. I like if it's a curve in the road, I'll usually pick up on that. I'll pick up on buildings.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why
Yeah.
I kind of just went, no, I didn't pick up really on any of that except maybe that there was
Okay.
people.
You've got
there.
these trees. So you see, you could have marked a B, probably just put it here, but it would be for all of them. You definitely picked up multiples, which is interesting. I consider multiple to be sort of a gestalt.
Yeah. Like I don't know, is it blocked off? Like
I
that
don't see
don't
much
know why I
else.
did the fence.
Yeah, well, you got the fence there,
But
and
I can't see if that's actually
on the
blocked or
side,
just
no. Being harsh, I would say this should be a pass.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, but no, hey, you did it.
That's
But
all right.
hopefully, some of my comments help. But with pictures, you break them up into their elements, right? So you would look at, first of all, multiple, but then you'd look at this. Do you see any X's around? Here, I think the circles, again, I just give it a little a because it's not an I, but I may be being too generous. Sometimes they're just passed, as you said, you're right, you rushed it.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I thought I had to do it right away.
Oh, I thought I said 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. No. I did it like when you first sent the email. When you first sent the email, I went, oh my, I have to do this right
Yes,
away.
that's right. You were in the group already. No,
Yeah.
actually, you had plenty of time. Next
Oh.
time that happens, feel free to do it at home, but don't rush it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, though. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And now let me make my group decision, which I make back up here. So as the group manager here, I think this one is clear. So it is easy. This one is a pass. Right? I've got a 5 in each direction and they both look reasonable. And so I'll just simply pass. Nothing wrong with passes. And right. So one of you two are going to be right, the other's going to be wrong. And it doesn't matter. Hopefully you learn either way. And remember, this is definitely a long-term project. So I'll go 1 yes and 1 no. Easy pass. And webinar host, fair enough. Very good. Now, so I just made a group prediction, but as I say, it's really of secondary importance. It's a way of organizing all the people, you know, so we put them in separate groups. And eventually, I think the group predictions will turn out to be highly reliable. But at this point, they're about the same as the people because of just, this is a perfect example of that. Now, associative remote viewing, I'm just reminding you, practice, practice, practice. And I think we learn by looking at it and watching ourselves. And now I'll even ask, watching our ego. And that not only during the session, that's what's so interesting about that long-term hit rate chart I showed you. What's going on in your head in between? Are you playing yourself down because you got a miss? I mean, it just makes sense to stay as positive as you can. When the negative stuff comes up, notice it. I like to send it away. I use a trash can, and sometimes if I really want to get rid of it, I'll use one of those green garbage trucks and mentally, right, here it is, something negative came up. So I have a sense of it. You know, it's interesting because there's like a place where it is. Anyway, there's a sense of it. And I will take this trash can and truck and set it out into space. And often I'll put it into a black hole. And that's my way of trying to get rid of the negative stuff. But there are a lot of other ways. Some people use what's called tapping. And it's worth doing. Once negative stuff comes up, why not get it out of your system if you can? But notice you'll never be able to get it out completely because the UCC remembers everything. But by trying to get rid of it, you reduce its strength, if you will. So that's the idea. It's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards, the Queen remarked. And I think this needs to be an enjoyable process, one where you are learning about yourself, your deeper self, the I self. And building up strong personal confidence, both the short term is like individual sessions, and then there's the medium and long term. Get visions of those. Joe McMonagle said in an interview many years ago, it's all psychological. And that's what we've been talking about here. The consciousness, the non-physical stuff is all psychological. And the ego now is important. And it's important in life as well. And to recognize that the ego is just that, it's important, worth nurturing. It's what gets through your physical life. But in a lot of things that are going on, if it's blinding you to stuff coming up from your subconscious, then it is indeed a negative. And that's why meditation is so good. It lowers the ego and allows other things to come up. And as you're learning and everything, there may be, from the sub, new actions that make sense, better ways to minimize the ego. Just with practice, 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 you may hear the voice, in quotes, of the sub louder. And there may be ways of doing that. So these are actions that might occur during the sessions. They're not changes of protocol. They're things that go on internally during your sessions to get you more good matches. And as you see which matches do match and which don't, and remember, you always get that for your hits and your high passes, but you'll have a sense of it if you're doing self-judging anyway. But with all of that, develop these actions. And remember, I'm mostly talking about interactions to support knowing that you will achieve a 70% to 80% hit rate. At least that's a goal I set for the Precog pros. And but even non-Precog pros, I think that's a reasonable, attainable goal. And as I said, some people are already at 65, 68%. I don't know if you can get up to 99% just because of the way life is, but maybe you can. But what I suggest is something like 70% to 80%. But hey, if you're down at 55%, maybe for you, this is all personal, you should set it for 65%, plus or minus 5%. You know that narrow range which the hit rate have? That's what we're looking for. And with all of this, learn more about yourself. Okay, I want to read this summary again, just because I think it's so important. The more he tries to make the brilliance of his ARV dependent on his own ego, on the conscious utilization of his ego skill, on his fighting experience and tactics, the more he inhibits the free working of the heart. We haven't talked too much about the connection between the heart and the subconscious, but the heart and the feelings and emotions from the heart are one of the best indicators of how things are going. Are they positive? How does the skill become spiritual? Only when the pupil becomes purposeless and egoless. Now, we've talked a lot about the egoless, but in many ways, what the purposeless means, at least in my mind, and again, even the masters have to use words, but I believe the meaning here is you just listen. You're just a witness. You don't have the purpose of hitting any particular target when you're in session. You trust. You just trust that what you get from your sub is perfectly right for you at that time because it's coming from your subconscious. And does that sometimes give you a pass? Well, then the pass was just right for you. So that's what I think that means. So you must be taught to detach from yourself. And it's interesting the way he puts this one. You must pass through the stage he is still at, no matter what that stage is. So this is for people who are still much better, but you must leave all that behind for good, even at the risk of irretrievable failure. So you leave fear behind too. So hit without taking aim. One of the beautiful things about ARV, in my mind, is it's hard to find the discipline where it's all about you in a non-egotistical way. It's all about the deep you. Here you are doing a remote viewing session. Nobody else is there. You're doing it all by yourself. Yes, do you have a history of the past of what you've learned? Absolutely, but that's your history. That's in your subconscious. That includes your future in particular, and not only this future, but other futures. But in particular, you're focusing on your future when you get to see the truth. So this is you at a later time. That's why I call it telepathy. I don't know, there are a bunch of sayings like that. You're changing all the time. You're not the same person you were here as you are here. Do you have a lot of overlap? Yeah, but you've had a lot of now moments in between. Anyway, I think you get the point. This is a type of telepathy, but it's between you at two different times. and the information flow goes both ways. Precognitive from here to here, and retrocausality from here back to there. Now, target information is available to your conscious self from your subconscious, whatever you want to call it, higher self, spiritual self, matrix. And you all know that now. We've seen enough examples of that. Set your ego aside, except to stay in protocol, generating your transcript. Your ego will be there when the RV session ends. So you really want to just minimize its impact on this. You know, you need to write down what comes to you, and your ego will come back. Don't worry about it. And then let, this word let, allow. You've heard different versions of it. The target info flow into your now conscious moment here. And then it's trust yourself is what it comes down to. And no matter what happens, if you can take the attitude of believing it's just right for you at that point in your life, I believe that's a very important, or can be an important attitude for each of us. You know, here we are, whatever is happening to us, don't deny it, and it's just right. And move forward, trusting that you're going to get to what your objectives are, which you've shared with your subconscious, which is connected to the UCC, which has enormous amounts, as you know, energy and information, and can make all this stuff happen. And this is where the longer term comes in, where you just trust yourself that you're going to be moved to take appropriate actions to achieve your precog consciousness life goals. And with that, I thank you, and I wish all of you health, wealth, and wisdom. And the wealth, by the way, I once gave a whole lecture on wealth. Wealth is a lot more than money. It really is. The original word was wheel, and it really does include doing good works, usually for a community. Could be for your family, but usually it's for a community. Okay, thank you all. Questions, comments? Well, maybe we're done. Okay. Okay, well, you're all welcome. I couldn't do this if you weren't out there. So I thank you. And with that, let me see if I can end this. Okay, thank you all, and keep precogging.